Hi. Alright, hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook. And we are gathered here today to discuss what was my most highly anticipated read of 2023, a book that I have been looking forward to since its announcement. And now the time has finally come. I finally read it, and before I even got the chance to read it, I just knew this was going to be a book that was going to require a dedicated video for a lot of reasons. We are talking about Never by Jessa Hastings today, and you guys probably have heard of the name Jessa Hastings because she is the author of the Magnolia Parks series, universe, whatever you want to call it, which is my favorite series of all time. I have talked endlessly on this channel, on all of my social media accounts, about how much I adore Jessa Hastings, how she is just an absolute artist, like an author like no other. I admire her so much. I think her mind is so incredible. I would give anything to just dive into it. So whenever she announced that she was going to be publishing a Peter Pan retelling, my jaw hit the floor. Like, I have never been so excited for a book like in my life. I don't know the last time I was so excited. I just adore the Magnolia Parks universe. I adore Jessa Hastings. Like, her writing is just so beautiful and like poetic and unique, and I grew up on Peter Pan. I adored Peter Pan. I watched it thousands and thousands of times. I feel like the Peter Pan cartoon was my first crush in so many ways. It just was something that meant so much to me. So the idea that she was going to take on this story and put her spin on it, like, I just couldn't be more excited. But that being said, when the book came out, I could not read it right away. I was busy. I just knew it was going to be a few weeks until I could read it. But right away upon initial release, a lot of things happened. A lot of drama sort of surrounded this book and its release, and I think it wasn't what a lot of people expected. Some sort of problematic things came out of it, just a lot of things that we will discuss. So don't worry, I'm not gonna not touch on those things, because I think it's not possible to talk about this book without touching on those things. But yeah, I just want to do a good old-fashioned kind of book review ramble today, where I just sit down and just like word vomit all of my thoughts that I have about this book, because I have so many. And I'm just gonna say right off the bat, if you have not read this book, or like if you haven't read it, I'm gonna be saying spoilers, because I don't think there's a way I can really talk about this without saying spoilers. So if you haven't read it and you want to read it, maybe wait. Or if you haven't read it and you just decided you don't care, fine. But regardless, this is your warning. There will be spoilers in this video. I'm not even gonna like sugarcoat it or say a certain cutoff time, because I need to get all my thoughts out. So yeah, like we've said, this book is a Peter Pan retelling. That's what it is meant to be. And Jessa Hastings said for so long, she really put it out there that, hey, like, this book is based off of the original Peter Pan story by J.M. Barrie, I'm not sure the right way to pronounce it, but she's like, if you grew up with simply like the live action Peter Pan with the cute little boy in it, I never watched that one, funny enough. I grew up on the animated version, and so I think from what she says, like, I think that version's a little bit different. And she's saying, you know, if that's the version you grew up on, if that's the only Peter Pan you know, if that's what you're expecting, like, you're gonna be very confused and maybe a little taken aback when you read this book. So make sure you read J.M. Barrie's version before going into this. So that is exactly what I did. I did my homework. My mother gave me homework, and I listened to my mother. So I read the original Peter Pan, and honestly, it wasn't to me that vastly different from the animated version. Like, obviously there's more details and there's other things involved, but for the most part, like, it was like I remembered that animated version. And so I did think it was funny that she made it, or not funny, but just interesting that she made it such a point to push for people to read that before reading this, because I think, you know, people know the story of Peter Pan, like to some extent. Like it's not that overly complicated, right? You've got Neverland, you've got this boy that never grows old, he flies, we got Tinkerbell, like you got Captain Hook. Like it's not like an overly complicated story. So it was interesting that she kept pushing for people to read that, but I didn't really think much of it until I started reading this book, and I could kind of understand why she would want you to have that as like a prerequisite, so you could kind of like prime yourself for this book. Because I think a lot of the things that people don't like about this book kind of come from that original version. And I'm not saying that makes this like a more enjoyable book to read, but it's just the facts. Those facts being, the main character in this story, Daphne, is essentially supposed to be the Wendy sort of character. You know, she's Wendy's like great granddaughter, I believe, in this story. Like Wendy is talked about, but she comes from this whole line of like darling girls, and the idea is that Peter has come back and taken each of these girls to Neverland, you know, whenever they were in their sort of tween era. So she is effectively like that Wendy character. And if you remember from the original Peter Pan, Wendy is kind of insufferable. She's kind of really annoying. She's kind of this young girl that thinks she knows everything and acts like she's some like mother figure, and like she's very overly educated. Like Wendy is kind of annoying, and Peter just as well is also very annoying and kind of stupid. Like, I mean, he's a kid. He's like a forever kid stuck in this body, and he acts like it. And I mean, you have to remember certain parts of the original Peter Pan. Like Peter is not, it's not some like beautiful romantic sort of love story between Wendy and Peter where everything's perfect. Like he does dumb things. Like he acts stupidly, he grinds her gears, and you know, isn't the most considerate, isn't the most kind at all times. He really is just like focused on himself and running around, and like that's how this Peter character is. So I did think it's funny, like reading reviews and stuff, you know, people really dislike Peter, and I have to agree with those people. Peter Pan in this story was easily, I think, the least likable main character, male main character I've ever read in a romance story. Like, you know, we have these male characters that are broody, that, you know, in our enemies to lovers stories, you have these characters that, you know, are rude and they might act a certain way, but they, you know, they usually redeem them. They almost always redeem themselves. You find yourself sort of falling for them, and even if they're mean, like they have these moments where they're nice and whatever. But Peter in this story truly was just like the worst. Like I don't really know how else to explain it. Like I assume this is a trust the process sort of thing, because this is a series, and I think it is kind of hinted at throughout the book that like maybe you're gonna learn that there is a little more to Peter, but he's the worst in this book. Like I couldn't even begin to understand why Daphne cared for him, why we were supposed to care for him, and I've heard a lot of people sort of echo that same sort of sentiment. But one thing that is different about this story is you have this other character. You know, in the original Peter Pan, you have Captain Hook. And in this story, we have Jameson Hook, who is basically Captain Hook's son. And it creates this sort of love triangle. In this story, you know, it starts out like the traditional sort of Peter Pan story. You're introduced to Daphne. She lives in that same darling house, but she is an only child, and she grew up with stories of Peter Pan, and like her mom and her grandma, like, you know, told him like he's gonna come for you, like he always comes from you for you, like it's what's meant to be, it's in the stars, it's fate, like he'll come. And so she always slept with her window open, like she always waited for Peter to come. And like in the original story, he always came when, you know, the girls were younger. They were like, I think 12 or 13, but you know, year after year kind of goes by and Peter never shows up, and it's like, where is he? What happened? But in this story, now Daphne is 17. She's like a month away from turning 18, and Peter still has not come, but one day he does. And that is the very beginning of the story. You meet Peter, you meet her. It very much resembles the original sort of Peter Pan story, and she has these plans to like go off to college and all this stuff, but her mom is like, no, you have to go, like it's your fate, go with Peter, like figure all that out later, like you must go, which is a whole nother topic. I'm like, what did y'all go through with Peter? Because like, why if I went through with this man, what Daphne is going through with this man, I would, like, my daughter would be locked away. Like, the windows would be sealed. Like, I would have locks on them, stay away. I don't really understand this fascination with Peter. But then again, their story with him is much more, they were kids, you know, they loved him, it was a crush thing, but this story is meant to be like more of like an adult sort of romance. So yeah, essentially Peter like whisks Daphne away, they go to Neverland, and the very beginning of this story is so like what I wanted, what I was expecting, what I hoped for out of it. Like, you've got that beautiful like Jessa Hastings style writing. You get to see her being whisked away to Neverland, like them flying there, her, you know, ending up there, and like the explanation of it, like it's so beautiful, it's so what I was wanting, it's so whimsical, like you feel like you're going to this magical place. And like I just want to read this one little line, like this is the last little sort of paragraph as they are going to Neverland, and like this was the teaser, this is what drew me in, like this is what made me so excited about this book. It says, "You might think I'm foolish for jumping out my window in the dead of night with a boy whose hair is as messy as his heart. But then, if you don't understand the lure and pull of the boy in question, I'm terribly sorry to inform you, you've never met Peter Pan." Like, that is so Jessa Hastings, like that style of writing, you're just like, oh shoot, like what am I in for? Like, that is what she sort of teased. That was the first quote she teased from this book, and I was like, I am so ready. Like, I'm gonna fall head over heels for Peter. I'm gonna fall head over heels for this Jameson Hook character that I know nothing about. Like, I was just so ready. And you know, the initial sort of chapter or two where this all begins, it is so good. You know, it starts off so strong, and then she gets to Neverland, and she, just like in the original Peter Pan, once again, Peter kind of abandons her right away. They get to Neverland, and he goes off and is hanging out with the mermaids, and she like falls out of the sky, lands in the water, and Jameson Hook sort of rescues her. And that is where we meet him. And right away, he is like this beautiful character. Like, you can just picture him in your mind. And like, look, I know myself. I knew that this Hook character was gonna be the guy. He was gonna be for me. He was gonna be my choice. Before I even read it, I just, you know, I had a feeling. And you know, we meet Jameson, and he's described so beautifully. And one thing that is repeatedly brought up about this book that I keep seeing, and I have to kind of agree with, Jameson has this very interesting way of talking, because like, he is a pirate, right? And she has him talk sort of like a pirate, but it's kind of a mixture of like pirate talk, and then it's talked about how he's, I think, like Irish and Scottish, like he's spent time in all these places. So if you guys have ever read the original, like if you've read the Harry Potter books, if you remember how Hagrid talked, that's the best way I can think to like explain how Jameson talks. Like, there are these words mixed in there that like aren't normal English words. Like, they might be Scottish or Irish words, so I don't want to be like, they're fake words. But you kind of have to like learn to understand the way he's speaking. Like, there's just certain words that you have to pick up on. And I did pick up on it as I kind of went through. You start to like understand how he talks, but there were certain sentences that this man said where I'm like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you're saying. And she does some little footnotes here and there where she explains, but some sentences I'm like, I'm not sure. And a lot of people took it as like pirate talk, and it was, but for me, I was able to get past it some, because I was picturing him as like a hot like Scottish man talking, and that's like kind of how I was reading it. And so yeah, like a lot of people hated the pirate talk. It wasn't my favorite, but for me, I don't think it bothered me as much as it did some other people. I was able to kind of get past it. But yeah, and then from there, it's like, literally, there's no plot to this story, and like, I'm not even joking. The entire book is her like running between Peter and Jameson. Like, one of the guys pisses her off, she goes to the other. And like I said, Peter is like the least likable character ever. Like, he's very controlling. He acts like a child. Like, he's an adult, sort of. He's like 18, and he acts like a child. Like, he wants Daphne all to himself, and he's like, you're mine, like nobody else can have you, like you're mine. And so she thinks like, oh, he loves me, like he cares for me, but then he is literally like making out with every girl on this island. Like, he's over here with the mermaids, he's over here with Calla, which is supposed to be like the Tiger Lily sort of character in this story, and he's with all these girls all the time. And like, won't let her go and be with anyone else, but then he's like literally hooking up with all these girls and like cheating on her and leaving her for like in precarious situations and like leaving her for dead. Like he's very forgetful. And I think, again, I think this has to be like a trust the process kind of moment. And I think in later books we're gonna understand a little bit more, because Peter's very like forgetful. He forgets things. He repeatedly calls Daphne Wendy, and he'll tell her something and then he'll forget, like she'll say like, you told me this, and he's like, I didn't say that, I would never say that. So I think there is more to Peter, and I think we are gonna learn more about him and like why he forgets things. And I just think there's a lot we don't know yet. So I'm trying to take a lot of what I hate about him with a grain of salt, but it makes him an extremely unlikable character, which is just like difficult to read. Like there's nothing about him that makes me want to like him and makes me want her to be with him, but you know, her entire life she's thought like, Peter's coming for me, like Peter's my fate, he's what I'm here for. But then she has this like undeniable attraction to Jameson, and it's just so funny because Peter like repeatedly like breaks her heart, upsets her, like she gets so angry that he's with other people, but at the same time she's over here like crushing on Jameson this entire, like she's obsessed with him, and the very second Peter pisses her off, she like runs to Jameson. So I'm like, you know, this feels a little bit like not like a bit of a double standard. Like how are you mad at him when you're like literally in love with this pirate boy and like just running to him the second Peter makes you mad? Like, you know what I mean? It just, they all were kind of just insufferable. The least insufferable character by a mile was Jameson. He was my favorite character in this book. But the thing about him is like I really liked him. Like there was a lot about him that I really liked. And Peter was just all around just terrible, just the worst, like never ever treated Daphne well. But the thing with Jameson is like, he would just say the nastiest things to her. Like when he hurt her differently. Like Peter would hurt her with his actions, I felt, and Jameson would hurt her like with his words. Like he was just very, he's very like romantic and, you know, smooth and whatever with her, but then whenever they'd get in a fight, and which 9 times out of 10 she would start for like no reason, it would just be stupid, but he would just say the most vile, nasty things to her where you're just like, why? You'd never say that to someone you care about. Like that's just so nasty. Like it's just terrible. So yeah, like you kind of hate every character in this book, and you know, like I said, there's just no plot. I feel like there's an ounce of a plot that we started to get maybe like 2/3 of the way through that was like sprinkled in there that I can tell is hinting at something more happening later. Like you definitely get hints at that, but in this first book, no plot at all. And I just think it's really interesting because, like I keep saying, Magnolia Parks is my favorite series. I think that series is incredible, and in so many ways Magnolia Parks doesn't have much of a plot either. Like so much of that story is, you know, Magnolia and BJ like getting together, breaking up, like fighting, breaking up, like running to other people, like hurting each other, coming back together. And same with like Daisy and Christian's story. Like that entire series is just like people's relationships with each other and like their day-to-day sort of lives and them hurting each other and getting back together and whatever. And there's not much of a plot to Magnolia Parks either. But I don't know why that works for me. Like I'm not a person that necessarily like has to have like a grand plot. Like I love like character-driven stories, but I think maybe because this was meant to be like a fantasy novel and it was a Peter Pan retelling, like I just think something about the fantasy setting where it's like these people have no responsibilities in life. Like they're just popping around on this island. Like they're just in Neverland. I think it just feels like there should be a little more substance to it or a little more going on. Not like we didn't need to go to Neverland to have this like love triangle with nothing else going on. It's just a bunch of conversations and a bunch of back and forth, and I don't know, I'm just so conflicted about it because there were parts of this book that I really liked. Like I said, I felt like, you know, I kind of hated every character. Peter was the worst and there was really no plot, but I also kind of couldn't put it down. Like I read it very quickly. Like I wanted to know what was going to happen. I couldn't put it down, but at the same time I was like, I don't like this. Like I don't feel like I like this. at all. But then there were certain scenes and certain parts and certain lines that I loved, that had what I love about Jessa Hastings, and like it was just her magic in it. And there was like one scene in particular in this story, you do get like finally a, you know, a little sexy scene out of Jessa Hastings. We haven't really seen her go into detail in that category, and she does it in this book, and I want to see more of it because it was so beautiful and it was so good. And I loved Jameson a lot in this book, but just, yeah, like I literally finished it just feeling conflicted of like, it's not what I thought it was going to be at all, and I didn't love it by any means. But I just love Jessa Hastings so much, and that's what's hard. And like one thing that I need to touch on, because it's such a big part of this book, and again the drama, I guess I'm kind of like inching into that, is Jameson in this story is 22 when it starts, and Daphne is 17, and she has like a month until she's turning 18. And so, I mean, obviously 17, 22, it's a bit of an age gap. It's technically illegal, like not okay. And I've seen a lot of people really upset over this aspect of the story, and I just don't know how I feel about it. Like obviously it's not appropriate. It's not in real life. If a 22, he ends up turning 23. If a 22, 23-year-old is dating a 17-year-old, I'm like side-eyed, like you can't do that. Like that's not, we can't, what? Like police, hello, what's going on? But like I'm no like prude to this stuff. I read a lot of like taboo stories. I read a lot of age gaps. So it's not something that I'm like super sensitive to. But what made it so kind of like weird and a little bit icky in this story is that, and I think it's really intensified by the fact that there's no other plot going on, Hook has like a countdown to her 18th birthday. Like he immediately like is into her, is making like sexual comments about her, wants to get with her, but then he's like, when's your birthday again? And he's like, okay, well, on November 1st. I'll talk to you November 1st. It's not November 1st yet. Another month to go. Like it's kind of brought up a few different times of like, clearly he wants to bang her, for lack of a better word, but he's like not gonna do it till she's 18. And it's like, you know, just something about it's like a little creepy, a little weird. And for me, I just didn't feel like that had to be a part of the story. Like I just wish instead that she was just 18. We could have just made her 18, or we could have just not talked about it and like not really given Jameson an age and just made it clear that they were like around the same age. Like I just didn't feel like it was a necessary part of the story. That being said, like you wait and wait for things to kind of happen between them, and when they do, it's like very worth it. So I don't know, it was just weird. It was just weird. Like that's my only thing I have to say about it. A lot of people felt like, oh, this whole book is about grooming and stuff. I think that's a little dramatic, but it's like to each their own. I don't know. It was just a little weird. And kind of like moving on to the other stuff that's being said about this book. Oh God, there were a few things in this book in particular that just made you go, really? Like this was written, read through, sent to an editor, surely read through again. Like this is a traditionally published book, and there were a couple of things, two real things that like I have repeatedly seen people talking about and that I myself noticed and was like, huh? That just come off very not okay, very just racist, for lack of a better way to say it, because that's what it is. So there's one line that happens in the very beginning of this book, and I can kind of tell from reviews that I've read and stuff on Goodreads. The reason I keep talking about reviews and like what people have been saying, you might know this book came out, and within one day of it coming out, it had gotten down to like 3.0 stars on Goodreads. Like the rating just tanked, and it was like, it was gonna go below 3 stars. It had more 1 stars than 5 stars in 24 hours, which is crazy, especially for an author like Jessa Hastings, who is so loved and so adored. And has such a cult following. I was just like shocking. I'm like, what is going on? Like, why do people hate this book so much? And I think a lot of people read this one line in the book at the very beginning and were right away like, hell no, made their reviews, were very upset, and that's what happened. And so the line that is said, it's literally in like the first or second chapter. It's when Daphne first meets Peter. It's when she's in her pitch black room, she is sleeping, he flies in, she's in the dark, he's standing in front of her, and she's describing how he looks. And she says, his skin is so tan that he looks dirty. And look, again, it is not my place to say if something is offensive. Like, it's not my place to say like, oh, this was racist or this was not, because it's not about me, clearly. Jessa Hastings very much has a way with words. She has a way that she describes things, and that line is fucking crazy. It's crazy. Like, when you just read that, especially like, I'm sorry, in the year of 2023, it's like, you said his skin is so tan he looks dirty. Like, what are we thinking? But like, okay, if you continue to read on from there, she literally says like, wait, no, he's actually dirty. Like, the whole point is Peter lives in a tree. He lives in a tree. He's shirtless all the time. He's covered in dirt. Like, he's quite literally covered in dirt. Cause she says, she's like, wait, no, like he actually is dirty. Like he has dirt all over his feet. She's saying that he's dirty. But like, she could have just said, he's covered in dirt. She didn't need to say his skin is so tan he looks dirty. It's just the way it was worded was so freaking like, what? And the second I read it, I'm like, how many people had to have read this book? Like, it was traditionally published. How many people had to have read this book and not one person was like, maybe we should word that differently, you know? So it's an unfortunate thing. I don't really understand how that got through, however many rounds of edits this book went through without it being rethought. But I am gonna say I don't think it was meant as a racist remark. I think she just worded it poorly, and not excusing the fact that it made the final cut, because like, what the hell. But yeah, so that's like a big thing that people were very upset about. And the second thing people are very upset about is, which is again fucking crazy, in this book there are these creatures, they're literally referred to as slaves. They're like these fairy creatures that come out in the middle of the night and they clean the house, they make the food. They're referred to as slaves in the books and in the book, and they're called brownies. And Jessa has talked on this since, and I've read comments, and apparently brownies are an actual thing of lore, and I want to say Scottish lore. There are these creatures that, just like in the book, they come out and they clean things in the night and whatever, and they're called brownies. And she decided to go with that original lore language, and it's another one of those things where I'm just like, so not one person read this and was like, maybe we shouldn't go with that. Like, it's just not necessary. And she explained that she's gonna add a footnote to the books explaining the lore behind brownies and whatever, because she wanted to stick to the original stuff. And I get wanting to be true to whatever you're trying to do, but it's a retelling, and we could have retold that bit differently. Like, we simply could have just, even if it was something similar, like, not similar, but like something that sounded like, it could have been anything, you know? We could have called them, I'm not gonna try to come up with a name, but we just could have called them something else, is all I'm trying to say. Like, if we're gonna retell a story, hey, you have some liberty to change it up. Like, if in this story, Captain Hook is actually Jameson Hook and he's some young, hot pirate, and all the other things that you added in, like, we could maybe not call the slaves brownies. And that's really all I have to say about it. I mean, I think it's just crazy. It's crazy. That's the only thing, like, I can't comprehend. I'm a writer myself, and I just feel like I'm constantly trying to think about like how people are perceiving things, and we're just so much more aware these days of like how our words affect people and what we're saying. And I'm just confused how, and I'm not trying to place all the blame on Jessa Hastings necessarily, but it's like there's a whole team that goes into making these books and publishing them, and I just think it's crazy that not one person caught those two things and just questioned if we shouldn't have done that. So yeah, I mean, I obviously have to, like, you can't talk about this book without talking about that. So yeah, some people have completely written off the book, written off the series. I think in a lot of ways also written off Jessa Hastings, because Magnolia is a black character in the Magnolia Park series. So I think a lot of people were like, how can you write these things and then have like a black female character as your lead in your other book? It's disgusting and blah, blah, blah. Look, I think that the internet's a crazy place, and I think things do kind of like snowball and get blown out of proportion. And I do think the reaction to all this has been a lot, a little dramatic. But I can understand it was jarring to read those things, and yeah, I just don't see how it wasn't caught by somebody. But all of that aside, I liked this book. I liked it. I didn't love it. It's nowhere near the Magnolia Park series for me. It's definitely not what I thought it was gonna be. I definitely was disappointed in it, but it's like it has so much potential. It's something that she said she's been writing for like 8 years and has put so much thought into. So I want to think that there's a lot more to come with it, with whatever comes next in the series, but also with the reaction to the first. I'm like, are we even gonna get the rest of the series? I don't know. I don't know. The cover is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like, this is easily the most beautiful book that I own. It's stunning. So that's my one definite positive thing that I have to say. But yeah, guys, I don't know. This book was an interesting experience, to say the least. And I'm still just kind of thinking through it, and I'm just going to put it on my shelf and continue to think through it until the next Magnolia Parks book comes out in February, because I'm counting down the days. I don't know. I love Jessa Hastings, but I don't know if her writing style is just like, I don't know if Magnolia Parks is just like her magnum opus, you know, if it's just like what she was meant to do. And I'm just very interested to see, as she like continues to write, if her style and her voice, like how it translates to other worlds. Like, for me, I think Magnolia Parks was just so like unlike anything that I've read before. And I was getting introduced to Jessa Hastings for the first time, and I just don't know if her voice, like her style of writing, I just don't know how it will translate to other worlds and other stories, or if like Magnolia Parks, like that universe was meant to be like what she does. Do you know what I mean? Because it was so, like, you could definitely tell this book is by Jessa Hastings, because in so many ways this book is very Magnolia Parks-esque. Like, so much of the like back and forth and the banter and the like the arguing and the getting angry and fighting, and like so many of the arguments they had, I'm like, it mirrors so much of what happens in Magnolia Parks. But for whatever reason in this story, it just like didn't hit the same. And I don't know if it's because it felt like I was like getting like a remake of Magnolia Parks, but like make it Peter Pan, and it just didn't work. Like, I don't know. I just don't know what to think about it. I don't know. But yeah, guys, those are all of my thoughts. I think I probably have more. I don't know. I don't know where this is gonna go. I'm very interested to kind of see what we hear. Like, if there's gonna be a next book, like when it's gonna be, if people will continue to read it. Like, once I feel like kind of the drama around it has settled down a little bit, and I'm interested to see other people's reviews and thoughts, because I truly haven't seen any. Like, a lot of big creators that have read this kind of just marked it as read on Goodreads or DNF'd it, and I haven't really seen people talking about it, especially not like positively. So I don't know. I do not know what is to come. But I really love Jessa Hastings, and I don't know, I love her writing, and I'm kind of feeling for her in a way during this time, because I'm just like, I can't imagine like coming out with a book and it's just like, but I mean, then again, it's like the things that people are upset about are valid and should have been caught. So I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. If you guys read Never, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Down below, anything you have to say, like if you have any ideas of where it's like going, would love to hear your like theories and predictions. I don't know, but that is it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.